Welcome to UK Matters in Accounting with me, Rob Brown, one of 5 podcasts going out on behalf of the Accounting Influencers Podcast Network. I'm thrilled to have with me today guest host, chairman of D&T Accountants, very successful multi-million-pound accounting firm, author of Boss It, and co-founder of ProNation. Carl Reader, good day to you.
Hey, Rob, thank you so much for inviting me to join you, and looking forward to getting stuck into tax season, because I know that all of your listeners are very busy and have probably got a mountain of tax returns to do.
Well, it's a busy time of the year, Carl, isn't it? And we know that in America, tax season is even longer, but it's a stressful time in a way, December, January for accountants here in the UK. What's your take on the whole tax season and the cadence of the calendar year for accountants?
Yeah, of course. So, look, I don't need to educate accountants on the tax season and the highs and the lows. But what I do want to do is to talk about some practical tips, not just from an implementation perspective, but also a mindset perspective to avoid having these problems before. Let me first address the elephant in the room. I'm sure that some accountants who lurk on social media might see those firms waving the flag that they've done all their tax returns and they've only got 2 left to sign. Well, you know what? It's really easy to do all your tax returns, but you've only got 10 to do. And I don't mean that facetiously. But the reality is that most firms who've got a wide range of clients and a number of clients find that tax season creeps up on them, and then it becomes more and more of a stress. Why is that? Really simple, because the volume that you have just exacerbates the seasonality, sort of November, December, January, and then the quiet time in February, March, April. So I just wanted to lay that one out there first of all. What I would say, though, is that we as accountants are guilty of creating tax season as the headache that it is. Right. Why is that? 2 factors, and they both come down to mindset, Rob. The first factor is that we allow clients to take the piss, if you excuse my French, but I think
they dictate the agenda, don't they?
Absolutely. So if we think about MOTs, for example, and the process of an MOT is probably similar to the same process of filing a simple tax return. Okay, it takes about an hour. There's some things that you know you've got to do to tick it off and sign it off, and there's a deadline to it. But here's the thing: you would never, ever drive up to a garage and drop your car off and say, "Look, my MOT's due today. Here's the keys. Good luck." You wouldn't do it, because the mechanic would tell you where to go. Okay. Instead, you would have a calendar, and you would see on your calendar that your MOT's due, so you'd phone up your garage, you'd book it in maybe a week, 2 weeks before. They would book it into their system. This is the crucial part. They would book it into their system, and you would know that you turn up at 10 o'clock in the morning, go off, have a coffee, pick it up at 11:30. Okay. A tax return takes about the same amount of times. But what happens with accountants? We shroud it in mystique, don't we? We make it seem like it's a really tough task and you need the professional to make sure it's done properly. So what do? We say you must get your records in by 31st of October, and we sit on it for 2 months before doing anything. That's the reality, okay? Guess what? Clients are cottoned onto that. They know it only takes an hour. They know that for their 200 quid they're paying, that you're not slaving over it at late nights to get their tax return done for a whole 2 months. So they then take the mickey. They know that your 31st of October is a bit of a cheeky call. And they think, well, it only takes an hour, so I'm going to drop it in first week of January. Right. But because you've allowed this to happen and you haven't got the processes and systems in place, actually you've got a mountain of them to do. And when they put it in 1st of January, you can't do it because you've got so many others to do. And you're conflicted. Do I look after this client who's been with me for 10 years? Or do I look after this client who sent it in October? So that's the issue that accountants face. That's the first fault here, is that unfortunately we have allowed our clients to dictate the agenda of when it's sent in or something, rather than maybe having a booking system or something. I don't know many firms that do this, but that's one way that I would hope some innovative firms will pick up on and run with, some kind of way of smoothing your own workflow and dictating that agenda. Secondly, and when I say we, I don't just mean the listeners to this podcast, I mean team members throughout businesses, tend to get satisfaction when a good job is done. And the problem is that as firms, we reward our team when all the tax returns are filed by the end of January. Okay. So where is the motivation?
Mm-hmm.
Where is it to work in April, May, June, July, August, September?
Yeah.
The motivation isn't there. And we give flippant nods to certain motivations. Oh, Mr. Client, you can know your tax bill a little bit earlier. If they've got a pretty good idea what their tax bill is anyway, within a couple of grand, they probably, if they've got any common sense to earn a decent amount of money, they've got common sense to work out roughly what their tax bill will be. And if there's something tricky, they'd have probably phoned you to ask you anyway. So they've got a rough idea of what it is. But your team members get the pat on the back when they knock out 800 tax returns in January, whereas it's been an average of 200 for every month before that. We've built this systemic problem ourselves, and we've created our reward structure, not financially, not in terms of even on workflow targeting, but our inherent reward structure of great job, guys, let's have a pizza day. We've done really well this year. We've created that based on getting everything done 31st January rather than smoothing our workflow. So that set the scene, and it set the scene to say it's not just those clients' faults, okay? There's other faults at play as well. There's practical faults, and I'll talk through some of the practical tips that you can put in place. But those two that I've just covered are actually more about the mindset and the approach to it from the leader of the firm. Okay, once you've set the culture and you set the systems to make it unacceptable, then actually you won't have a bad season, because clients will typically do what you tell them to do because you're their trusted advisor. And if they really are causing you a headache and they're just not compliant, are they the right client for you? So that being said, what do we do to fix tax season? Okay. And I know practitioners are probably already getting a bit tired, because I know that capacity is stretched and we haven't got enough team members and there's tax returns mounting up and clients are worrying about their finances. So I get that.
And it speaks to mental health as well, Carl. It's such a stressful time for all concerned.
It does, Rob. And you touching on mental health, unfortunately, makes my next comment seem really harsh, but I'm going to go with it anyway, because yes, mental health is a very valid concern. However, there's also a case of hard luck. You didn't work hard enough last February, March, April. So you've got to work harder this February, March, April to prevent it happening again. Okay. So I just wanted to cover off your mental health point, which is very valid. I'm not trying to undermine that. But
it's avoidable, isn't it? That's what you're saying.
But it's avoidable and it's in your control. Okay.
Yes.
When there's things that go on that are outside of your control, like the COVID pandemic, then it's understandable that you would allow peaks and troughs to happen, but you can control your workflow within your practice. You've chosen not to, okay? Because most practitioners I know go off on a skiing holiday in February, okay? They have their quiet time. They allow all their teams to take time off. They don't continue the pace of January through to February and March to finally fix this once and for all. So what do you do to fix it? First things first, you make sure that you have a very timely approach to chasing in records and making sure that you get the data. Now, when I say timely, some firms see timely as, well, we chase them in September. The deadline's not till January. No. You chase them in February, March and April. Okay, you chase them before the end of the tax year. And it's a perfect opportunity to say, if you're going to need any help putting this together, you know where we are. If you'd like a tax planning meeting before the tax year end, so that we can advise you rather than telling you in a year what you should have done, then let us know. Okay, so it gives you some upsell opportunities as well. But you make sure the cadence of chasing starts in February. It doesn't start in April, certainly doesn't start in September. Next up, you make sure that you have an automated process as much as possible to regularly follow up on these. Thirdly, you make sure that you supplement them with a good old-fashioned phone call, because if you're anything like me, you ignore emails. Emails are the equivalent nowadays of the pizza brochures that you get coming through the door.
Wow.
You put them in a cupboard, and when you need them, you rummage around to try and find that Domino's pizza brochure. That's the reality of emails, okay? People, when they get your MailChimp email, they don't think, do you know what? I really need to act on this right now. Okay, it's one of 200 emails they get that day. It's put in the drawer, and when they need to speak to you, they'll search it through the search functionality. In the old days, that wasn't the case because we didn't have unlimited email storage. But now we do. Now we have so much inundation with communications online that that's only the hygiene factor of covering your back to make sure that you can say to the client, we told you 12 times. So you need to have a phone call process, because when people phone you, it's important. you need to work out what the value to your client, not to you, to your client is of them getting it filed earlier. So I was a touch dismissive about the tax bill projection. I don't necessarily believe that's the sole thing. So I think that you need to be looking at how you can help them, what calculations you can do, what opportunities you can find for them, what tax planning. You really need to dig into all of the various ways that will be relevant for that client. You have to bear in mind, not all clients are created equally. Your high net worth granny who's done really well in life, she had a really successful business that exited for 10 million. She's going to have very, very different drivers to, let's say, the taxi driver who's retired and his pension wasn't quite enough. So he works on Mondays, Tuesdays and Wednesday evenings just to make an extra few quid. They've got very different drivers, but human nature applies to them both. That doesn't discriminate, okay? And humans are inherently lazy. So if you're not helping them to help you with your seasonality, guess what? Both the old granny and the taxi driver will drop it in last minute. So you need to work out what particularly resonates with each of them to make sure that you're driven in the right way. Now, it might be that the taxi driver, is trying to cobble together a deposit for his kids to buy their first home, perhaps, or might be looking for some refinancing to fund that, fund that pension that we talked about was a bit lacking. Well, wouldn't you think a submitted tax return might just help that process a little bit? Okay, but you only know this through truly knowing your customers and knowing which buttons to press to help drive this forwards. There's loads of tools and off-the-shelf methods that you can do for this. There's arguments about penalising your clients for this. I mean, I'm not a big fan of that. Why on earth do you think it's your place to penalise a client when the tax office already does it? Who are you working for? I think that's a bit, a bit unsettling for me. You could be looking at early booking discounts. If they come in early in the year, let's say April to June, they get a 25% discount. That could be a way of doing it. You could be looking at implementing scheduling systems. There's all sorts of stuff you can do. But ultimately, the tough part is thinking about how to crack it. The tough part is implementing that stuff, and you need to do it before you get busy again.
Yeah. Carl, this is terrific. There's so many ways accountants can take charge and recalibrate their calendar to be much more effective, serve the clients better. It's the kind of thing you talk about in ProNation, isn't it, really?
It really is. So, these approaches, they're not for everybody, and some things will work, some things won't. I know one of the recent discussions in ProNation actually was around automated reminders for tax returns. And somebody was saying that their client had had 20 text message reminders. And then we had a conversation about who are the best suppliers for the kit that does this and so on. So we can go deep into it. But I think the message I want to share today, Rob, whilst there is that opportunity, and I'd love to have anybody join us to do that, the core message, the impact I want to deliver on this one podcast, but if I can do anything, it's to change that mindset around the seasonality and for firms to have intentionality behind February and March and April. Rather than taking your foot off the accelerator, now's the time to push forwards.
Yeah. Carl Reader, easing the tribulations of a busy tax season for accountants. That's been terrific. Thanks so much for your time and your insights today.
Brilliant. Cheers, Rob.